Would you take a moment and join me in the attitude of prayer? Gracious and loving God, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be pleasing and acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen.
Amen.
Well, this week I was looking at some different blogs that pastors write about their experience in ministry in all sorts of different places. And I came across a story about a man who serves in Los Angeles. And the particular church he serves has a lot of homeless folk that live around their church, and the work that he ends up doing with the homeless community. And in this particular story, he was talking about Christmas Day and how it happened to fall on a Sunday that year. And he was just exhausted, like most clergy are by the end of Christmas Eve service. But he still got up and headed to church, knowing there would be a small crowd, but breathing a sigh of relief that there wouldn't be as high of an expectation on him since it was Christmas morning. And he talked about that morning as he drove to church. His commute was easy for the first time ever because there was not the traffic. With it being a holiday, everyone was pretty much at home. And as he got to a particular point on his journey where he has to go through an underpass, an odd sight caught his attention, he said, and he had to take a second look. There, under the underpass, was a pink aluminum Christmas tree. It was about 3 feet high, he said, and it was set up on a small triangular littered patch of grass between the bridge and the on-ramp for the expressway. There, amid all of their own belongings and trash that people threw out as they drove, and the grime that comes with an inner city, was this strange, glittering pink Christmas tree, a symbol of joy for this community. It made him smile, and also at the same time tore him apart on the inside, because he was well aware that under the bridge where the dirt had been along with the tree, that a number of people had called that place home. It provided them shelter against wind and rain. And his church, being only 2 blocks away, knew most of them because they would come during the week while he had office hours and come pick up a lunch where he would learn their stories and their names and build a relationship with them. All from a variety of backgrounds. All had a variety of reasons for being homeless. But with little doubt, he said in his mind, he knew that that pink aluminum Christmas tree had been rescued probably from the side of someone's trash dump on a road and placed there as their own for a bit of the Christmas joy that we all search for. The pastor would go on to say that it reminded him of the Gospel of John, that the light shines in the darkness. The darkness did not overcome it. If you've been in Bible study with me before, you know that John is the gospel I struggle with most, for multiple reasons. I won't bore you with them all. But one of the reasons I struggle with John is his beginning, the prologue. I like a good nativity story, or you can be like Mark and start out with a strong baptism. But he starts out with this very philosophical approach, which just has never been one of my favorite things. Sometimes it's turned me off from really getting to know these words. But I was perhaps shown the light this week.
No pun intended.
And to say it lightly. But we have to look at John a different way is what I learned. That this prologue that we read this morning from the gospel goes like this. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. That is John's beginning, in the beginning. It's John's version of a nativity story. There's not the shepherds or angels or the wise men that we all expect, or that babe wrapped in cloth. No, in this nativity story, John takes us back to the very beginning, and echoes the words from the book of Genesis. In the beginning, God created. If you remember in Genesis, God moved over the chaos and the darkness and said, "Let there be light." It's a type of new birth. In John's Gospel, from the very beginning was the Word, the God who moved over the face of the deep, over the darkness, who spoke, and light emerged. This is the same God who was from the beginning and spoke that word. This is the same God that became flesh and dwelt among us. John says later, "What has come into being in him was life, and the life was the light of all people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it." Or in other words, the God who takes on flesh, our flesh, does not ignore the darkness, but shines in the very midst of it. I'm sure we could all share stories of what we think were chaotic or dark times in our own lives. Whether you realize this or not, John Wesley had some dark days. He failed miserably in coming on his trip to America. He was supposed to go out and create all of these communities and hopefully churches that would flourish. But he had to flee. He broke laws, church laws especially, that had gotten him into trouble. He wasn't welcome because some of the ways in which he tried to build relationships weren't the smartest. Instead of working with people, he told them why they were wrong. We all know that doesn't work well. But that didn't mean he failed. Even though he writes about that as a dark time, there's still a way that light was shared. And later we would know things changed here on this side. But when he went back to England, he did things like leave the structures of the church and go out into a field and conduct church services, where he would get 3 times as many people as were in the pews on Sunday morning. And that was considered a bad thing by many, because they were supposed to do church a proper way. But yet he was helping people see the light of Christ. People that would have said they lived in dark times because they were working in tough conditions, weren't getting fair wages. Some of them had lost their spouses or the sole caregiver in their family because of debtor's prison. But that's John Wesley in those days. That was his work in sharing the light. We have people that help share the light today, do we not? I'm sure you can think of those examples. But I bet there are opportunities in our own lives that we have to share the light. Some that we sometimes miss. So I was reading, like I said, about some pastors this week and came across another interesting story about this pastor who was visiting at a hospital and wanted to check on one of his parishioners, and when he stopped at the front desk, there was 2 employees standing there talking, and they were upset. And what they were upset about was that someone had stolen baby Jesus from the Nativity. Well, that's not too far off, right? That happened this year in our own community. I don't know if you saw it, but First Lutheran, their baby Jesus was stolen. And this pastor did not realize, the one at least I was reading about, how serious this was to this couple of employees. He tried to make a joke, to make light of it. You know, things like, maybe someone stole Jesus because they needed him more. They didn't think that was very funny. And then he went on to say that none of his answers that he was giving the employees, made them feel better. So he finally said, well, I guess someone decided to steal Christ right out of Christmas, and walked away. But he realized that he had missed an opportunity. And he went back on his way out and said, well, let's hope that someone brings them back soon and restores the hope that we all need. Right? Is that not what Christ symbolizes, whether it's at Christmas time or at Easter? Aren't we in search of this almighty, powerful, transcendent God who comes near, becomes imminent, And I think we are good, if you've grown up in the church, talking about, right, the transcendent God, this mysterious and unknowable God, something that goes beyond our human comprehension. And all that's true. But I think people are really searching for a God that can take on flesh. One who knows what it's like to be one of us, to live among us, to experience darkness, to experience the chaos we sometimes all have in our lives. And Jesus did just that. Jesus came announcing life and not death. If you continue to read in John's Gospel, you'll see that a little later on he says, Jesus says, I come that you may have life and have it abundantly. Jesus' way is the way of our Creator. It is the way of abundant life. A place where his spoken word, in the midst of our chaos and darkness, will create life. Will create something new. Maybe even make something possible that seems impossible. And in and through Jesus, we are shown how we are meant to live, to be full of life, full of hope, full of joy. That even as God poured upon us the new light of God's incarnate word, we are to allow this light into our lives, and not to hold on to it for ourselves, but to let it shine forward, to let it touch each of those we encounter. Well, you might be thinking, well, how do we do this? Well, the kids did one way. They were going to make cards, pictures, to send to some of those shut-ins or those who are sick. What are some other ways you think we can do that? Share that light. What is it? Yep, you could go to the nursing home and visit. Absolutely. Read a story. Yeah, they do love it. Yep. Oh yeah. Yes, people in nursing homes love to be visited. They can't get enough visits. I read a story this week about a lady who visited a nursing home every week. And as part of her visit at the nursing home, she took different sewing projects and helped people learn to sew. And as they sewed, she would share her favorite Bible verses. But when her pastor found out what she did, he invited her to be on the evangelism committee. And she turned him down. That's not evangelism. That's what she told him. But that is evangelism. That's the very heart of what I'm trying to get us to think about. You can go and visit. You can share a gift like sewing. Share your story. You can share your prayers. They don't have to be public prayers. They can be private prayers. Or if you're asked ever to pray with someone, that's a good way to share. We can offer praise in the good times and in the bad, and to offer it publicly. I think that perhaps the most important thing we discussed in our Bible study this week was personal experience. You can call it whatever you want. You can use the word testimony. You can use the word story. But being willing to share where you've been, how God has helped you through, and where God has led you. But you might be thinking, well, I'm not comfortable sharing scripture or sharing my story with someone. Well, it can be as simple as this. You can find a way to talk to someone who doesn't go to church. I had an encounter once with a young lady at the hospital. I was called there as her chaplain. She'd given birth several weeks early, and there was a big question as to whether or not the baby would have permanent damage because of how early the baby was. So the mom has all sorts of questions. Why did this happen to them? How could a loving God allow something like this to ever happen? And instead of saying things like, oh, well, this is what our faith says, or you should read scripture, I could say, well, I've not been there, but I believe that God is big enough to answer questions and have questions that they can't answer. So you can ask why all you want. And then as we shared some more about our stories, and we came to a time to pray, In my prayer, I reminded her that it's okay to be like the Rachels in the Old Testament and to cry out for those children that have struggled, who have lost. And know that God will hear her cries, just as God heard Rachel. There are ways we can know the word and share it. It doesn't have to be just in our own personal experience, but you can draw from your personal experience too. I hope that when those opportunities present themselves, you'll find a way to take them on and see them as a way God is using you at work in this world to share the word. God, the Creator, who created the earth and the universe and saw that it was good, continues to create today.
Amen.
And that's good news.
Amen.
Creation continues. And the Creator remains active, always seeking the best for people, desiring that we may truly live and live abundantly. And today we continue to celebrate that living, that creative living word, taking on our form, our substance, becoming a human being. In a world that often pulls at our hearts and tugs us in different directions, may we have the courage and the ability to remember the good gifts that the Creator gave each of us. Things like the sun and the moon. Things like the sky and the water. Animals, the incredible gift of life, of flesh and of blood, of breath and memories. This very day. The moments that are yet to be. And all those people who come into our lives. Joy and sorrow. And all those things it means for us to be fully human, to be fully alive, and to live life abundantly. And above all, in our living, may we remember the gift of the Word made flesh. The gift that was sent to save us, to heal us, to bring us joy, to bring us back to God's own self. Amen.